June 2015. It's a balmy summer in Macon, a mid-sized city located 85 miles south of Atlanta and known as the heart of Georgia.
It's very affordable, a great place to raise a family.
It's not too country, it's not too city. I think it's the perfect blend.
But just after midnight on June 12th, the quiet city is jolted by an urgent call to the Bibb County Sheriff's Office from local pastor William Pounds.
We'll see the emergency.
Ma'am, my girlfriend, she shot herself in the head. I need an ambulance, please. I need somebody here.
Yes, sir. I can get him en route for you, okay? But I need you to try to calm down for me.
Oh, Jesus.
On the 911 call, William is panicking and Kendra is in dire need of medical attention.
She's not breathing.
Okay. She's
not breathing. I'm going to try to do CPR on her.
Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4,
2,
4,
3,
1,
4,
2,
5,
3,
6,
4,
7,
1,
8,
2,
9,
3.
As William fights to keep Kendra alive, first responders race to the scene. Every second is critical.
As the minutes tick by, Kendra's chances of survival grow dimmer.
For as long as anyone could remember, 46-year-old Kendra Jackson had been a beacon of light in her community.
Kendra was a sweetheart. When she showed up, she brought the sun with her.
People loved her. They say that she was a good mix of sassy and classy.
When you say classy, you say Kendra. You just knew she was gonna look her best, speak her best, present her best at all times.
The daughter of a reverend, Kendra was raised in a devoutly religious household alongside her 3 siblings.
Growing up in a Christian home, especially when your parents are involved in preaching, it can have a big influence on you, and there's a lot of pressure to always do your best.
That kind of defined her trajectory in life.
And nothing in Kendra's life was more important to her than motherhood.
Kendra got married at a young age. Her and her husband had 3 kids.
But the relationship between Ms. Jackson and her husband was not as strong as they had hoped, and they ended up growing apart and divorced.
In the years following the divorce, Kendra worked hard to give her children a good upbringing.
Okay, great.
She was very loving towards her kids. Her kids were the priority.
I'll take care of that for you.
She was able to eventually find a good job as a personal banker. She had a part-time job working in a jewelry store.
I'm like, girl, why are you working 2 jobs? Because she was trying to take care of people.
You're a little busy, girl.
If anyone could handle the stress of motherhood and work, it was Kendra.
Taken care of.
We call her Michelle Obama.
Good afternoon.
Like if she was having a bad day, she would have the classiest bad day ever. She was always in mama mode and let me make it better for you mode.
Kendra was the total package. So it seemed only a matter of time before a new suitor came knocking.
She's maintained her faith that God would provide her a good man.
Can I help you?
Yes, I have some questions about my bank account there.
Okay, let me take a look.
William Pounds was a prominent preacher, and he was also a senior master sergeant in the Air Force.
If he was to walk in, he would immediately grab your attention. He's a good-looking man. He was always well-dressed, well-mannered.
The 2 of them quickly hit it off.
I hate to be forward, but you mind joining me for dinner on Friday?
I'd like that.
He had a great resume. He also was a man of faith, which immediately resonated with Kendra.
Within a short period of time, Kendra was smitten, and then when she saw him preach, her love grew even bigger.
But God said we got to clean your filth. You still got some dirt on your nails. But even though you have dirt on your nails, he died. Yeah, before you got your engine running like new, he died.
He was so charismatic.
His congregation loved and adored him.
He was able to breathe his own passion into the Word of God, and Kendra found that absolutely inspiring.
To Kendra, it felt like William could be the one, but she had no intention of racing to the altar.
Kendra's first marriage failed, and she was cautious about running into this one, so her and William took it slow.
This is a new person that you're introducing into your world, your children's world.
They dated more than 12 years.
I think game night went well with the kids.
It did. We should do it again sometime.
He was safe for her, and he was her nice guy. And he created that story for her.
In 2012, William finally popped the question.
Well, I was thinking about doing this somewhere a bit more romantic, but Kendra Jackson, will you marry me?
Yes.
In that moment, she was like, okay, this is the one. This is the man that God sent to me.
Kendra thought all of her dreams were coming true.
But now, a few short years later, the couple's future has been hurled into doubt.
Instead of walking down the aisle, Kendra is barely clinging to life.
William was on the phone with 911 and told investigators that she shot herself in the head.
Damn it, Kendra, why you want to do this to me?
When first responders arrive on the scene, William leads them to the bedroom.
She's over here.
They find her collapsed on the floor in a pool of her own blood.
The first responders immediately jump into action.
The paramedics tried to apply first aid.
Every attempt was made to resuscitate her, but eventually it was clear that it was too late.
Kendra was dead.
For more than a decade, Macon pastor William Pounds had been Kendra Jackson's rock.
William was her handsome knight in shining armor. He was charismatic. He said all the right things.
She was planning a wedding to, a man that she loved.
Until a bullet to the head severed their bond forever.
The paramedics tried to apply first aid, but it became too late.
Kendra was dead.
When investigators from the Bibb County Sheriff's Office arrive on the scene, they step aside with Kendra's grieving fiancé.
Sir, I'm sorry for your loss. Do you think you're up to walking us through what happened?
Yeah, I can do that.
Mr. Powell said it started off as a normal day. Him and Kendra and the kids had spent quality time together.
They all had dinner together, and then Kendra drove the kids over to their father's house.
Hurry back.
Kendra returned to the home around 10 p.m.
She came back. Him and her got into bed.
They are watching a basketball game and starting to discuss some of the details of their relationship.
Kendra started pressing him on a date for their marriage.
We've been engaged for a while now. I think it's time that we should start planning the wedding.
She wants her wedding because the whole world around her and William's relationship expects this to happen. Because that is the Christian thing to do.
He told her that he wasn't ready to get married, and she didn't respond well to that.
What do you mean you're not ready? We've been together for like 15 years.
He really loved Kendra, but after so many years, he had felt the relationship had run its course.
William tells investigators that when he broached the subject of ending their relationship, Kendra started to spiral.
All the years that she has invested in their relationship, she feels like she had wasted her time.
Kendra, calm down. We can talk.
Don't tell me to calm down!
He says that she flew into a rage.
Kendra grabbed the handgun off the dresser drawer.
And he thought that she would shoot him.
But instead, Kendra turned the gun on herself.
William told investigators that she shot herself in the left side of the head.
Oh my God!
He goes, attempts to resuscitate, he attempts to do whatever he can.
William said he hurried up and rushed to her side to control the bleeding as he dialed 911.
2, 3, 4.
To the detectives, William looks like a broken man.
He just explained he witnessed his fiancée committing suicide, and that's not an easy thing to cope with.
Thank you.
With any death like this, they have to perform an investigation. But in the case of suicide, it's typically just a formality.
The crime scene has the appearance of a suicide. The victim is lying on the floor with a gun in close proximity. The blood is in the appropriate area. The gunshot appears to match up with the scenario provided by Mr. Pounds.
They did find an entry on the wall from the gunshot wound to her head.
But then investigators discover something else that piques their interest. A second bullet hole.
Looks like another bullet hole into the bed.
Sure does.
So this strikes investigators as odd because based on Williams' recitation of events, she only fired one bullet.
However, detectives know that a traumatic event can play tricks on a witness's mind.
When you have so much adrenaline and stuff rushing through your body, sometimes you can't account for what really happened during that time.
We might have what we call auditory exclusion, which really lessens a person's ability to hear in chaotic situations.
Also, with many suicide attempts, some may fire a practice shot before they work up the courage to turn the gun on themselves.
Having completed their preliminary examination, detectives hand the scene over to their forensic team.
Now, Bibb County investigators have to face the difficult decision of notifying Kendra's loved ones.
Kendra's teenage daughters are with their father.
Kendra took her life.
The children, her ex-husband, are all shocked that Kendra had taken her own life.
Suicide? Are you sure?
It was disbelief, because there was no prior indication that Kendra would be susceptible to committing suicide.
There has to be another explanation.
Our mom would never hurt herself.
The family did not believe that suicide was the cause of her death.
They're convinced there has to be more to this story.
Something's not right with it. And your gut is always right.
Detectives in Macon, Georgia have learned that moments before Kendra Jackson allegedly committed suicide, her fiancé, William Pounds, called off their engagement.
He was starting to have some second thoughts about the future of them as a couple.
William said that she grabbed his .40 caliber pistol,
Kendra!
shot herself in the head.
But now Kendra's loved ones are telling the investigators they find that story hard to believe.
There's no way our mom killed herself.
They didn't believe that she would take her own life.
The family was adamant because it was outside of her character and also her faith.
What about warning signs? Did your mom seem depressed lately?
No, not at all.
Amen.
Kendra's daughters tell investigators they spent the previous day with their mother and William.
They said they didn't feel anything out of the ordinary.
And there was even cause to celebrate because Kendra's youngest daughter had just landed a new job.
They had dinner together to celebrate, and then she dropped them off to their father's house to spend the night.
Kendra made plans the next day to spend time with her daughter and go shopping. It just didn't line up.
Kendra's daughters also echo what William said in his statement. The couple wasn't in agreement about their impending wedding.
He just kept pushing back the wedding.
William and Kendra got engaged in 2012. They initially had planned on getting married in 2014. And when the date came around, William encouraged the couple to push it back even further.
Mr. Pound's explanation for the delay was financial issues.
The couple bickered about it. They had, small discussions. Nothing ever rose to the level of thinking that Kendra would take her life behind it.
By the end of the interview, investigators consider that Kendra Jackson's death may not be an open and shut case.
The fact that her loved ones, the people closest to Kendra, were so adamant that this could not be, that leads investigators to reassess the facts.
Could there be more to the story?
When detectives receive the results of Kendra's autopsy, even more questions rise to the surface.
Mr. Pounds told detectives that Kendra shot herself in the left side of the head. Well, the autopsy clearly disputed that. The evidence showed that she had shot herself in the right side.
Of course, adrenaline was running high. So maybe that was an explanation.
However, like the earlier finding that not one, but 2 bullets were fired inside the couple's bedroom, it's another inconsistency in William's version of events.
Had the chaos played tricks on William's memory, or is the story not adding up?
Police ask William to come into the station for a follow-up interview.
Appreciate you coming in on short notice.
Of course. Anything I can do to help.
William was cooperative and he seemed willing to assist in the investigation.
The night Kendra shot herself, tell me again what you saw.
He tells them again about their argument and how she got up and grabbed the gun from their dresser drawer.
William just concretely says she shot herself on the left side of her head. Now, the investigators know from coroner evidence that that is not true.
At that point, Mr. Pound's story starts to unravel.
Your version of events doesn't line up with the evidence. There were 2 shots fired in that bedroom.
Well, I only remember 1 shot.
Did you alter the scene in any way?
No.
That's when investigators asked William a point-blank question.
Did you shoot Kendra? Absolutely not.
Despite the inconsistencies in his story, William maintains that Kendra's death was a suicide. But before investigators end the interview, he drops a bombshell.
He tells police officers that he was in another relationship.
Because I'm engaged.
He was engaged to someone else, as well as Kendra.
During an interview with police in Macon, Georgia, William Pounds has just made a stunning confession. The 47-year-old pastor tells detectives he called off his wedding with Kendra Jackson because he was engaged to another woman.
This information comes as a huge surprise to investigators.
Who's gonna believe that a pastor is engaged to 2 women? Not even believe. Who's gonna even suspect?
According to William, the other woman in his life is a police officer who lives 45 minutes away in Atlanta.
What's her name?
Sierra Brinkley.
It's a discovery that forces the investigators to rethink everything they thought they knew. Could Sierra Brinkley be involved in Kendra's death?
Maybe she wanted William all to, herself.
The fact that she was a police officer, she had access to a weapon that might help her facilitate this type of crime.
Sierra agrees to drive down from Atlanta to meet detectives at the Macon Police Department for an interview.
She confirms that yes, she and William, they are engaged.
She reveals to detectives that they had actually been together for over 10 years.
You said 10 years?
That's right.
I mean, that was like wow.
Double life. That's my first thoughts. That's a double life.
Imagine having two fully involved relationships happening an hour away from each other for 10 years. The level of coordination, the level of secrecy that you must maintain.
You're trying to satisfy two people. You're trying to take care of two homes.
As an investigator, when it comes to Sierra, we want to look, when did she become aware that Kendra existed? Where was she at the time this incident happened?
According to Sierra, Kendra's existence was no secret.
What William had told Sierra is that Kendra was an ex, that they had been broken up, separated for years.
I thought that was the truth up until like a few weeks ago.
One day, Sierra decided to drive down to Macon and surprise William at his house.
When Sierra popped up at William's house unannounced, Kendra's there.
Sierra asked her, what are you doing here?
What do you mean, what am I doing here? Who the hell are you?
Kendra held up her finger with a wedding ring on it and said that they was engaged to get married.
So what did you do next?
I confronted William.
Wait, no. Go upstairs. I'll handle this. Go upstairs.
William, what is going on?
Let me explain.
William promises to Sierra that things are over with Kendra.
Look, she just came over to pick up some stuff. Our relationship, it's over. Come on. Don't give me that look. You're my only girl and my soon-to-be wife. Okay?
He says they can start preparing for their marriage by going to premarital counseling, hopefully to resolve some of the issues around honesty and fidelity.
And you agreed to go to counseling?
Yes, I did.
They were due to be married on June 12th, and that was the exact same day that Kendra died.
But as investigators know, instead of walking down the aisle with Sierra, William spent that evening with Kendra.
When she found out that William hadn't ended things with Kendra, Sierra could have flown into a jealous rage.
Did you do it and now William is covering up for you?
When investigators pose that question to Sierra, she immediately denies any involvement in Kendra's death.
Of course, Sierra says no. The last time she was even at William's house was on June 5th, a full week before the incident happened.
As police work on verifying Sierra's statement, detectives receive the completed report from the CSI technicians who processed William's home. And their findings are eye-opening.
When detectives had initially walked through the crime scene, they noticed a bullet hole in the wall, but despite exhaustive searching, the CSI was not able to recover the bullet.
What happened to that bullet that was in there, and why was it pried out of the wall?
The forensic team also failed to recover the second bullet that went through the mattress, or either shell casings.
A closer examination of the comforter and mattress revealed more alarming evidence.
They could tell by the way that the bullet had passed through the comforter that the comforter had been moved after the shots were fired. The bed had apparently been remade in an effort to conceal the bullet hole in the mattress and the comforter and the sheets.
Somebody had tampered with the scene.
The trajectory of the bullet that killed Kendra raises an even bigger red flag.
There was no way that Kendra was standing when she allegedly shot herself in the head. The evidence points to her being on the ground.
Based on these new findings, investigators feel confident that Kendra was murdered.
These are no longer discrepancies that you can attribute to faulty memory. So police believe that William has been lying. He's trying to protect himself or his other woman.
When investigators listen to the 911 call William made on the night of Kendra's death, they make yet another chilling discovery.
You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
They noticed that Mr. Pounds muted his end of the call 3 to 4 times.
Hey, partner.
Why would a person in the process of administering first aid CPR mute his call?
1, 2, 3. You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Wait, you hear that?
Play that back.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
When he unmuted the phone call, you can hear the toilet flushing in the background.
If you are doing CPR, then how are we hearing the flush? What's really going on?
As Macon investigators listen to the 911 call local pastor William Pounds made on the night he alleges his fiancée Kendra Jackson committed suicide, they notice a curious noise in the background.
You still there with me? Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
You can hear the toilet flushing in the background.
They suspected that toilet flushing noise could actually be William flushing down the bullet and the shell casings.
When detectives follow up with the paramedics who responded that night, they poke even more holes in William's story.
William told 911 operators that he performed CPR on Kendra before first responders arrived. But first responders, they said there was no sign of blood on William's clothes, except for a couple tiny specks on his pants.
With the amount of blood on the scene, his hands and his lower shirt should have been covered in blood.
The first responders go on to say that William told them something else in those first frantic minutes.
Their story they got from Mr. Pounds was different than the story that Mr. Pounds told detective.
He said that he was downstairs, and then he heard the gunshot go off upstairs, and then that's when he ran upstairs.
William told them that he had to kick the door in order to get to Kendra. There was no evidence that the door had been kicked in at all.
As red flags pile up, detectives also start to hear from Kendra's closest confidants. They all agree that her decade-plus relationship with William was nothing short of a roller coaster.
Kendra's friends explained to investigators that William was not this perfect fiancé, perfect man.
William was a liar, he was a manipulator.
He knew he was good looking, and he had the gift of gab. I think he felt as though that was a calling card for him to get into any door he wanted to.
She had caught him cheating on multiple occasions.
Who is this?
Kendra.
Who is she?
Phone.
Who is this?
Stop.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry, okay? You know how much I love you. It won't happen again.
To their dismay, friends say Kendra stayed with William despite his philandering behavior.
Even when she knew it was broken, she loved enough to be able, I can put it back together, I can fix it. She really believed that.
Jesus reminds us to forgive.
It's almost like, you know, when somebody's in a Ponzi scam and they keep putting their money into it, and you don't want to tell them not to, but you kind of want to take their checking account. But she kept depositing, and he kept taking.
She's already experienced divorce. So maybe Kendra was thinking, I don't want to start over.
Don't worry.
Friends say the couple's engagement offered Kendra a fleeting moment of happiness.
She was proud of her ring, but I think that's all she had, was that ring. It was a shallow happiness.
They would discuss a wedding date, and he would move it or come up with some type of excuse.
Anything that he said was a lie. All of it was a lie. And every day it was killing her. Every day it was taking more of Kendra from Kendra. And she loved so hard that she put blinders on and couldn't even see that she was being stripped from herself.
However, in the past month, friends say Kendra had stopped wearing her engagement ring.
After Kendra found out about Sierra, that felt like the last straw.
Now, not only have you been played by a fool, but you've been playing the fool.
Who are you? Kendra was done at this point.
What's going on?
In the course of their interviews, detectives learned that William's affair with Sierra Brinkley wasn't the only one.
The investigation reveals that William had been seen about 5 separate women.
He was stringing them all along, telling each of them that they were the love of his life.
It was disgusting.
When authorities received Sierra Brinkley's phone records, William's last defense finally crumbles.
She was in Atlanta. She was nowhere near Macon when this took place.
She was not at the scene of the crime when it happened.
On August 21st, 2015, Bibb County Sheriff's investigators charged William Pounds with malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
William was arrested for Kendra's murder, and he was calm and maintained his innocence.
The family finally has this moment where they can breathe and they have a sense of relief.
But that feeling of relief doesn't last long.
His bond was $500,000. That's a lot. But he reached out to his congregation.
On September 15th, at William's bond hearing, his congregation shows up and rallies around him.
Pastors in the faith community are revered because they are delivering the word of God every week. People truly believe they are instruments of the divine. And so the initial reaction for a lot of people is denial.
They was like, no, he didn't do this. And they went ahead and bonded him out.
Within weeks of his arrest, William is back on the street as a free man.
For Kendra's loved ones, it's an ominous sign of things to come.
It just goes to show just how powerful he is. He feels invincible.
It's almost like he's gotten away with it. He was so charismatic. He tricked them, too.
If I never had a problem, if I never had conflict.
He is the instrument of God. They can't let God go to jail.
And then I wouldn't know how to go to the manufacturer.
By the fall of 2015, Macon police have charged Kendra Jackson's fiancé, William Pounds, with killing her and staging it as a suicide.
William is a respected, beloved pastor, so the congregation is quick to rally money to get him released.
They felt like he was wrongfully accused.
They paid his bond and allowed him to get back out on the street.
Backed by a devoted flock of believers, prosecutors feel that William's conviction is no sure thing.
It can be hard to overcome a defendant's image, especially when someone is seen upright and moral.
In the eyes of the public, William Pounds is a pillar in his community. And so it's gonna be difficult to convince a jury that he's actually a liar, cheater, and a murderer.
But as the trial date approaches, prosecutors receive a helping hand from an unexpected source: William himself.
As a condition of his bond, Mr. Pounds had to wear an ankle monitor so his whereabouts could be monitored. He had restrictions.
He's approved to go to places that, a normal person would need to go. The doctor's office, the grocery store, his home.
However, the powerful pastor has no intention of following the rules.
He was breaking his bond conditions. He was drinking, he was going out to parties like nothing never happened. Kendra was gone, this sweetheart. These two daughters now don't have a mother. So many people affected. And the nerve of him to celebrate anything ever again in life.
He was clearly violating the conditions of his bond, and he was rearrested.
This is when the congregation started to realize that this is not the church-going man that they all thought he was.
Just to see that many people being manipulated at one time, it's just evil. I felt bad for the people.
When William's trial begins in October 2017, he still remains confident that his pious image will carry him through to a not guilty verdict.
William enters the courtroom with a Bible in his hand.
He's still keeping up with this persona that he's created.
But prosecutors aren't having it.
They contend that William's mountain of lies can prove that he's the killer.
Prosecutors tell the jury that on the night of June 12, 2015, William and Kendra got into an argument.
I noticed you ain't been wearing that ring I gave you.
You damn right I haven't.
Based on the statements from her friends, prosecutors believe that Kendra was done with William.
Why would I wear the ring of a man who's engaged to another woman?
As simmering resentments bubbled to the surface, the couple's argument intensified.
Prosecutors believe that Kendra, having seen William's web of lies firsthand, was going to expose him for a fraud, a liar, a manipulator.
That's right. I'm going to tell the entire congregation that their pastor is a damn hypocrite.
You know what?
And so instead of taking responsibility for his actions, investigators say that he opted to silence her altogether.
What are you going to tell now?
What are you doing?
What are you going to tell now?
What are you doing?
I'm not doing anything. Where are you going?
William took his military-issued pistol and fired 2 shots. One that went through the bed and another that went through Kendra's head.
Once Kendra was dead, Mr. Pounds immediately tried to stage the scene so it appeared that Kendra had committed suicide. Mr. Pounds retrieved the bullet from the wall, retrieved the casing from the floor. He took both items into the bathroom and flushed them down the toilet.
Once the jury retires to deliberate, it doesn't take them long to return with their verdict.
William Pounds was found guilty of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
William was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
It's a victory for the dedicated investigators who worked tirelessly to bring William to justice. But for Kendra's loved ones, the conviction falls short of healing their wounds.
I don't think there's any amount of time that he could do to repair the pain and the hurt and the brokenness. That doesn't bring Kendra back.
It takes a unique kind of manipulator to prey on so many women.
He did it for arrogance. He did it for nothing. He did it because he felt as though he could get away with it.
While nothing can replace what Kendra's loved ones lost, her legacy continues to inspire them to this day.
Kendra taught me that regardless of what happens, you hold your head high. And when everything is said and done, your love and your life will speak for itself.
The parking lot was almost empty by the time the music ended. The last notes of a piano recital had faded into the cool California evening, leaving behind the kind of silence that only follows beauty. A few audience members lingered outside the auditorium, exchanging polite smiles before walking toward their cars. Street lights flickered to life one by one, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Somewhere in the distance, traffic rolled steadily along the highway, unaware that another life was about to disappear without a sound. There were no screams. No desperate calls for help. No witnesses who could later tell investigators exactly what they had seen. Just an ordinary night that would eventually become the first chapter of a nightmare stretching across an entire decade. For years, police departments in different states would chase fragments of a mystery that refused to fit together. One victim was found in California. Another hundreds of miles away. Some had been stabbed. Others had been shot. A few had been restrained. Their lives seemed to have nothing in common except one terrible coincidence. They had crossed paths with someone who blended into the background so perfectly that almost no one remembered seeing him. He was not loud. He was not reckless. He did not leave behind dramatic messages or taunting letters for investigators. Instead, he perfected something far more dangerous. He became forgettable. Neighbors would later describe him as quiet. Co-workers remembered him as polite and dependable. People who served with him believed he was disciplined, calm under pressure, and respectful of authority. His military background seemed to reinforce that image. If someone had been asked whether Andrew Erdils could be capable of extraordinary violence, the answer would almost certainly have been no. That assumption would cost countless lives. The most frightening predators are rarely the ones who look frightening. Sometimes they hold the door open for strangers. Sometimes they smile politely at cashiers. Sometimes they wear a uniform that earns instant trust. And sometimes, after spending the day appearing completely ordinary, they drive through the darkness searching for someone who has no idea they are being hunted. Long before investigators learned his name, they were chasing a ghost. Each crime scene seemed to tell a different story. A young college student. A woman trying to rebuild her life. Someone walking alone. Someone waiting for a ride. Someone who simply happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The methods varied enough to confuse experienced detectives. One victim suffered a frenzied knife attack. Another was executed with gunfire. Some appeared to have been bound. Others showed signs of prolonged terror before death. It was difficult to know whether police were looking for one killer or several. The lack of a clear pattern became one of his greatest weapons. Investigators often rely on consistency. Most serial offenders repeat familiar rituals. They choose similar victims. They use similar methods. They revisit places that hold emotional meaning. Andrew Erdils understood, consciously or instinctively, that predictability could become a weakness. His crimes evolved. His violence adapted. His confidence grew. And while detectives debated theories inside brightly lit briefing rooms, he quietly prepared for another hunt. The terrifying truth is that serial murder is rarely about the act of killing alone. For some offenders, death is only the final moment in a much longer psychological performance. The real objective is domination. Absolute control. The transformation of another human being into someone completely powerless. Every decision belongs to the killer. Every second belongs to the killer. Every breath depends on the killer's willingness to allow it. Investigators, who would eventually study Andrew's crimes, came to believe that this overwhelming need for control lay at the center of his violence. The weapon could change. The location could change. Even the type of victim could change. But the emotional destination never changed. He wanted fear. He wanted surrender. He wanted to watch hope disappear from another person's eyes. Those who later interviewed him would discover a chilling emotional detachment. His descriptions of violence often lacked visible remorse. Instead, They reflected someone who viewed people as objects within a private fantasy that existed only inside his own mind. That fantasy remained hidden for years. Because Andrew understood appearances. He understood routine. He understood patience. Patience is perhaps the least discussed quality shared by many successful serial offenders. Movies often portray murderers as impulsive monsters driven by uncontrollable rage. Reality is usually much quieter. The most dangerous killers can wait. They observe. They adapt. They learn. And when the opportunity finally arrives, they move with startling precision. Andrew had received military training that emphasized discipline, planning, and emotional control under stress. Those skills were intended to protect lives. Instead, investigators would later argue that they became tools serving a horrifying purpose. He knew how to remain calm. He knew how to avoid unnecessary attention. He knew how to evaluate situations before acting. Most importantly, he understood that confidence often comes from appearing completely harmless. It is difficult to fear someone who smiles. It is difficult to suspect someone who speaks softly. It is difficult to imagine evil hiding behind ordinary conversation. That contradiction lies at the heart of this story. Because this is not simply the story of a serial killer. It is the story of trust. Every victim made what seemed like a reasonable decision. Walking toward a parking lot. Accepting a ride. Speaking to a stranger. Standing alone for only a few moments. None of those choices should carry a death sentence. Yet somewhere nearby, there was a man who viewed ordinary moments differently. To him, they were opportunities. As investigators reconstructed his movements years later, they began noticing something deeply unsettling. Andrew rarely appeared rushed. He was willing to spend long periods driving through neighborhoods, parking lots, deserted roads, and commercial districts. He watched. He waited. Sometimes he left without approaching anyone. Other nights, he found exactly what he wanted. A woman temporarily isolated from everyone else. Isolation became his hunting ground. A nearly empty parking lot. A quiet roadside. A forgotten stretch of desert. A place where help would arrive too late. Predators in nature often separate the vulnerable from the safety of the group before attacking. Human predators can display remarkably similar behavior. They identify moments when social protection disappears, when witnesses become scarce, and when confidence replaces caution. Andrew understood those moments with disturbing clarity. But no investigation begins with certainty. It begins with confusion. A missing person report. An abandoned vehicle. An unanswered phone call. Parents wondering why their daughter never came home. Friends convincing themselves that there must be a simple explanation. Hours become days. Days become weeks. Hope slowly transforms into dread. Then comes the phone call no family ever wants to receive. Somewhere, detectives are standing beside a body. Somewhere else, another family is about to discover that life has permanently divided itself into two chapters, before that day and after it. For Andrew Erdiels, the journey toward becoming one of America's lesser-known yet deeply disturbing serial killers did not begin with headlines. It began in silence. One disappearance. One investigation with too few answers. One crime scene that seemed isolated from everything that would follow. No one could yet imagine that the same unseen figure would continue moving across state lines for years, leaving behind grief that stretched from California to Illinois. By the time law enforcement realized they were dealing with something far larger than a single homicide, precious years had already been lost. And during those years, Andrew Erdils was not hiding in abandoned buildings or living under false identities. He was walking among ordinary people. Working. Talking. Smiling. Waiting. Because while the rest of the world believed monsters announced themselves through obvious cruelty, one of the most dangerous men in America had already learned the greatest disguise of all. He looked exactly like everyone else. If someone had passed Andrew Erdils on a sidewalk in Southern California during the late 1980s, they probably would not have looked twice. He did not carry himself like a man consumed by chaos. His clothes were ordinary. His posture reflected the rigid discipline of military life. His conversations, according to those who knew him casually, were measured and unremarkable. He could be courteous. He could be patient. He knew how to make eye contact without appearing threatening. Nothing about him suggested that, beneath that carefully controlled exterior, another version of himself was waiting for darkness. That contrast is what makes this case so unsettling. Many notorious killers leave behind obvious warning signs. They lash out publicly. They struggle to keep jobs. They attract attention through unpredictable behavior. Andrew did the opposite. He built a life that appeared stable enough to discourage suspicion. He understood that the safest place for a predator is often in plain sight. While investigators would later spend years reconstructing his crimes, they also found themselves asking another question. How does someone live two completely different lives? How does a man spend part of his day following routines, exchanging greetings with co-workers, completing ordinary tasks, only to spend another part searching for strangers who will never make it home? There is no simple answer. Human beings are capable of creating emotional compartments, separating one identity from another. Most people do it in harmless ways. A teacher behaves differently in a classroom than at home. A police officer leaves work behind at the end of a shift. A surgeon who performs difficult operations returns home to family dinners and quiet evenings. But in rare and disturbing cases, those compartments become something darker. For Andrew, investigators believed there was a clear division between the man the world saw and the man who existed only when no one was watching. One lived according to society's expectations. The other answered only to his own violent fantasies. Long before the first victim disappeared, those fantasies had likely been developing in silence. The human mind does not become capable of extreme violence overnight. Behavioral experts have long observed that many serial offenders spend years building elaborate inner worlds before committing their first known murder. Fantasy becomes rehearsal. Rehearsal becomes obsession. Eventually, imagination alone is no longer enough. Although every offender is different, this progression appears repeatedly throughout criminal history. By the time violence occurs, the psychological groundwork has often been laid over many years. Andrew's childhood would later become a central topic during court proceedings and psychological evaluations. His defense described a home marked by instability and abuse. Accounts presented during the trial painted a picture of frequent violence, an alcoholic mother, harsh punishment, and a family environment where fear was common rather than exceptional. None of these circumstances excuse murder. Millions of people survive traumatic childhoods without harming another human being. Yet investigators and psychologists often examine those early years, because they may help explain how distorted beliefs about power, trust, and control begin to form. For a child, home is supposed to be the safest place in the world. When that safety disappears, something fundamental can change. Fear becomes familiar. Violence becomes ordinary. Control becomes survival. One incident from Andrew's adolescence drew particular attention. At the age of 13, he killed the family's dog with a baseball bat before claiming the animal had died in an accident. The story disturbed investigators not simply because an animal had been killed, but because of what followed. The deception. The willingness to conceal responsibility. The apparent absence of visible remorse. Experts have long debated the significance of childhood cruelty toward animals. It is not, by itself, proof that someone will become violent later in life. Many children who harm animals do not become killers, and many serial murderers never displayed that behavior at all. But when such acts appear alongside severe abuse, emotional detachment, and later escalating violence, they become one more piece of a deeply troubling puzzle. Years passed. Andrew grew older. The frightened child became a disciplined young man. After high school, he entered the United States Marine Corps. For many recruits, military service offers structure, purpose, and the opportunity to leave difficult childhoods behind. It demands discipline, self-control, teamwork, and accountability. Those values have helped countless young men and women build meaningful lives. Andrew appeared to thrive within that structure. He served at Camp Pendleton and 29 Palms, two major Marine Corps installations in California. There, he received training designed for combat, not crime. He learned weapons proficiency, survival skills, tactical awareness, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. The military did not create the darkness within him. But the discipline he acquired may have strengthened his ability to conceal it. He understood routines. He understood preparation. He understood how hesitation could mean failure. Those lessons, intended to protect lives in dangerous situations, would later take on a horrifying new purpose. Outside the base, Southern California was changing rapidly during the 1980s. New housing developments spread across once empty landscapes. Highways connected growing suburbs. Shopping centers stayed open later into the evening. College campuses expanded. People commuted longer distances, often traveling alone after sunset. For most residents, these changes represented opportunity. For a predator, they represented something else entirely. More isolated parking lots. More unfamiliar faces. More people whose daily routines could not easily be tracked. In retrospect, investigators realized that Andrew's hunting grounds were not random. He favored places where ordinary life created temporary isolation. A person leaving work late. Someone walking to a car after class. A woman waiting alone for transportation. None of these situations appeared dangerous until it was too late. The terrifying reality of predatory violence is that it often begins with normality. There is no dramatic soundtrack. No visible warning. No instinctive certainty that something is wrong. Instead, danger arrives disguised as politeness. A friendly smile. A casual conversation. An offer to help. The very behaviors society encourages people to trust. Andrew seemed to understand that instinctively. Witnesses who encountered him, but survived, often described someone who initially appeared calm and approachable. He did not always rely on force at first. He relied on confidence. He relied on the assumption that decent people expect decency from others. Trust became another weapon. As the years passed, investigators would discover that Andrew did not fit comfortably into one investigative profile. His victims came from different backgrounds. Their lifestyles varied. Their circumstances differed enough to obscure obvious connections. Some worked regular jobs. Some were students. Some faced difficult personal circumstances. Some were simply living ordinary lives. This inconsistency frustrated detectives. Serial investigations often depend upon identifying patterns. Victimology, the careful study of victims' lives, helps investigators understand why particular individuals were targeted. But Andrew complicated that process. His choices seemed flexible, suggesting that opportunity often mattered more than occupation, income, or social status. The constant element was vulnerability. He looked for moments rather than identities. Moments when someone stood alone. Moments when darkness erased witnesses. Moments when escape became difficult. Those moments existed everywhere. And because they existed everywhere, fear would eventually spread far beyond a single neighborhood or city. The public, however, knew none of this. While detectives quietly pursued leads that went nowhere, everyday life continued. College students hurried to evening classes. Restaurant employees finished late shifts. Friends promised to call once they got home. Parents waited for headlights to appear in the driveway. Most nights, those headlights arrived exactly as expected. Sometimes they never came. The silence that follows an unanswered phone call has its own unique weight. At first, families invent reassuring explanations. Maybe traffic is bad. Maybe the battery died. Maybe plans changed. Hours pass. Concern replaces annoyance. Then fear quietly enters the room, refusing to leave. Every family connected to this case would eventually describe that same emotional journey. Hope. Confusion. Denial. Then unbearable certainty. For investigators, each new crime scene carried an invisible burden. Every unsolved homicide raises the possibility that another victim may already be at risk. Every missed clue represents time the offender continues to move freely. Every unanswered question becomes another opportunity for violence. What no one yet realized was that the man responsible had already begun perfecting something even more dangerous than murder itself. He was perfecting invisibility. Not literal invisibility. Social invisibility. The ability to exist inside crowded communities without leaving a memorable impression. To become another face in traffic. Another customer in line. Another driver waiting at a red light. History often remembers serial killers through sensational headlines and shocking courtroom testimony. But those headlines come later. Before the documentaries. Before the newspaper front pages. Before the detectives finally connect the evidence. There is only an ordinary day. An ordinary street. An ordinary stranger. And somewhere, without anyone noticing, the first move in a deadly game has already been made. That game was about to claim its first known victim, setting in motion an investigation that would remain unresolved for years and reveal just how devastating one man's hidden darkness could become. January the 18th, 1986, began like countless other Saturdays in Southern California. The winter air carried a coolness that rarely lingered for long after sunrise. Palm trees swayed gently against a pale blue sky, and traffic flowed steadily through Orange County as families shopped, students studied, and young professionals planned their weekends. Nothing about the day hinted that it would become one of the darkest chapters in the history of the region. Among the thousands of people moving through their routines that morning was a 23-year-old college student named Robin Brandley. To those who knew her, Robin was much more than another face on a campus filled with ambitious young people. She was thoughtful without being quiet, determined without being arrogant, and kind in ways that rarely drew attention to themselves. Friends remembered her as someone who genuinely listened when others spoke. She laughed easily, but she also carried herself with a quiet maturity that made people trust her almost immediately. She loved music. Not simply as entertainment, but as a language capable of expressing emotions words could never fully capture. Hours spent practicing the piano were never a burden. They were moments of peace. Music required discipline. patience, precision. Every piece demanded concentration, yet every performance asked the musician to reveal something deeply personal. Robin embraced both challenges. Those closest to her believed she had an exciting future ahead. She was studying at Saddleback College, balancing academics with everyday responsibilities that are familiar to many young adults. Like countless students, she dreamed of building a meaningful career while remaining close to the people she loved. Her life was filled with ordinary plans. Assignments waiting to be completed. Future concerts. Family gatherings. Phone calls she intended to return. Dreams she assumed she had plenty of time to achieve. There is something especially heartbreaking about victims whose final days appear completely normal. No dramatic farewell. No sense of impending danger. Just another page in a life story that suddenly ends without warning. That Saturday evening, Robin attended a piano recital on campus. The performance hall glowed warmly under soft lighting, creating an atmosphere that felt calm and welcoming. Audience members settled into their seats as musicians prepared backstage, adjusting sheet music and taking slow breaths before stepping into the spotlight. When Robin performed, every note reflected years of dedication. Her fingers moved confidently across the keyboard. The melodies rose and fell through the auditorium, filling the room with the kind of beauty that leaves listeners holding their breath until the final chord fades into silence. Applause followed. Smiles were exchanged. People congratulated one another before gathering coats and making their way toward the exits. Outside, night had already settled over the campus. Streetlights illuminated sidewalks lined with parked cars. The temperature had dropped enough for people to pull jackets closer around their shoulders as they walked through the quiet evening. For most attendees, the night ended exactly as expected. They reached their vehicles, started their engines, drove home. Robin never made it that far. Somewhere between the recital hall and the safety of her car, her path crossed with a man whose intentions remained invisible until escape was no longer possible. No one witnessed the exact moment their lives intersected. Investigators would spend years trying to reconstruct those missing minutes. Did he approach her while she unlocked her car? Did he offer assistance? Did he force her into another vehicle? Or had he already been watching the parking lot, patiently waiting for someone who appeared isolated? The answers died with the only two people who knew exactly what happened. That uncertainty would haunt detectives for decades. Across countless homicide investigations, there is often one brief window during which everything changes. A victim who feels completely safe enters a situation that appears ordinary. A stranger closes the distance. A conversation begins. Within moments, the possibility of escape disappears. Whatever happened in that parking lot unfolded quickly enough that no alarm reached nearby buildings. No frantic cries echoed across the campus. If anyone noticed anything unusual, they either forgot it or never realized its significance. By the time concern began to spread among those expecting Robin to return home, she was already gone. At first, there was confusion rather than panic. Perhaps she had stopped to visit a friend. Perhaps her plans had changed unexpectedly. College students often stayed out later than expected, and minor misunderstandings were common. Families cling to ordinary explanations because the alternatives are too terrifying to consider. Every passing hour, however, made those comforting possibilities less believable. Her family waited. Friends tried reaching her. Questions multiplied. Eventually, worry became impossible to ignore. A missing person report marked the beginning of a desperate search. Police officers interviewed classmates, instructors, and anyone who had attended the recital. Investigators retraced Robin's final known movements, hoping someone had noticed a suspicious vehicle or remembered seeing her leave the building. Every detail mattered. Every minute counted. Yet the investigation immediately encountered its greatest obstacle. There were almost no answers. No clear witnesses. No obvious suspect. No straightforward explanation for how a young woman had seemingly vanished from a public place. For detectives, disappearances involving adults often present painful uncertainty during the earliest stages. Some missing individuals leave voluntarily. Others experience accidents or medical emergencies. The challenge is determining which possibility investigators are facing before valuable time disappears. In Robin's case, those closest to her insisted that voluntarily disappearing made no sense. She was responsible, reliable, connected to people who loved her. She had plans, commitments, a future. Nothing about her life suggested she would simply walk away. As officers continued searching, the mood shifted. Hope remained, but fear quietly grew beside it. Experienced investigators recognized that the first 48 hours often determine whether a missing person is found alive. Every passing day reduced the likelihood of a happy ending. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the search teams and interview rooms, the man responsible resumed his ordinary life. That contrast remains one of the cruelest realities in homicide investigations. While one family experiences unimaginable fear, the offender frequently returns to routines as though nothing has happened. He goes to work. He eats dinner. He speaks with neighbors. He watches television. He becomes another anonymous face moving through society, while investigators struggle to identify him. Andrew Erdiels had not yet become a recognizable name in law enforcement. No task force tracked his movements. No nationwide alert connected him to violent crimes. If anyone had encountered him during those days, they would have seen only another young Marine stationed in Southern California. His appearance offered no obvious warning. His demeanor betrayed nothing. That anonymity became his greatest protection. For investigators searching for Robin, every unanswered question deepened the mystery. Had the offender known the campus? Was the attack planned? Had Robin been selected specifically, or had she simply been the first vulnerable person he encountered that evening? These questions would remain unanswered long after the crime itself. Days turned into an agonizing wait. Search efforts expanded. Flyers appeared. Loved ones held onto hope despite growing evidence that something terrible had happened. The emotional weight carried by missing person cases differs from confirmed homicides in one devastating way. Without certainty, families exist in a painful space between hope and grief. Every phone call becomes a possibility. Every unexpected knock on the door raises the heart for a brief moment before reality returns. It is an emotional limbo that few people can truly understand unless they have lived through it. For Robin's family, that uncertainty would soon come to an end. Not because she was found alive, but because investigators would discover evidence that transformed a missing person investigation into one of the most brutal homicide cases Orange County had ever seen. And with that discovery, Andrew Erdiels' first known murder would begin revealing the horrifying violence hidden beneath the mask of an ordinary man. The discovery came with the kind of phone call every investigator dreads. It was no longer a search for a missing college student. It had become a homicide investigation. Several days after Robin Brand lay vanished from the Saddleback College campus, her body was found in a remote area of Orange County. The landscape was quiet, isolated, and unforgiving. Dry brush stretched across uneven ground, broken only by scattered shrubs and dusty trails that few people traveled without a reason. It was the sort of place where silence lingered, interrupted only by the wind pushing through brittle grass. Crime scene investigators arrived knowing almost immediately that they were looking at extraordinary violence. Even seasoned detectives, people who had spent years confronting humanity at its worst, paused before speaking. Some scenes force investigators to distance themselves emotionally in order to do their jobs. Others remain with them for decades. This was one of those scenes. Robin had been stabbed 41 times. The sheer number of wounds suggested something beyond a desire to kill. It reflected overwhelming rage, domination, or an uncontrollable need to continue the assault long after death had become inevitable. Her clothing had been torn, and there were unmistakable signs that she had fought desperately to survive. The ground itself told part of the story. Disturbed dirt. Broken vegetation. Scattered evidence of a violent struggle. Nothing about the scene suggested surrender. She had resisted with everything she had. Investigators photographed every inch of the area before collecting physical evidence piece by piece. Every footprint, every fiber, every impression in the soil had the potential to identify the person responsible. But 1986 was a very different era in criminal investigation. Modern audiences often assume that every crime scene immediately yields DNA profiles, surveillance footage, and digital records capable of identifying a suspect within hours. The reality was far less certain. DNA profiling was still in its infancy, and not yet the routine investigative tool it would later become. Security cameras were rare, particularly in parking lots and remote outdoor locations. Mobile phones did not exist as they do today. There were no GPS records, no social media timelines, and no digital footprints to reconstruct a victim's final movements. Investigators depended on physical evidence, witness statements, and patience. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it wasn't. In Robin's case, it wasn't. Detectives carefully reconstructed her final known hours. They interviewed students, faculty members, maintenance workers, security personnel, and anyone who had attended the recital. They searched for witnesses who might have noticed an unfamiliar vehicle lingering in the parking lot, or a stranger behaving suspiciously. The answers never came. People remembered seeing Robin smiling after the performance. Some remembered speaking with her briefly. Others recalled watching her leave the building. After that, the trail simply ended. The absence of witnesses became almost as disturbing as the murder itself. How could someone abduct a young woman from a college campus without attracting attention? The answer, investigators believed, lay in timing. Parking lots gradually empty. People focus on reaching their own vehicles. Engines start. Headlights disappear into the night. Within minutes, a crowded place becomes almost deserted. Predators understand these transitions. They know that danger often exists in the small spaces between public and private life. The walk from a building to a car, the few seconds spent searching for keys, the moment when someone believes they are already safely on their way home. Somewhere during those ordinary moments, Andrew Erdiels found his opportunity. Investigators did not know his name. Not yet. But the crime scene revealed fragments of the personality behind the attack. This was not an accidental killing. It was not a robbery gone wrong. Nothing indicated that money or valuables had motivated the violence. The excessive number of stab wounds suggested emotional investment. Yet detectives faced a contradiction that would puzzle them for years. There was no known relationship between the victim and her killer. No jealous former boyfriend. No rejected admirer. No family dispute. No obvious personal motive. If Robin had been chosen at random, why had the attack been so intensely personal? That question would remain unanswered until much later, when investigators finally understood the psychology driving the man responsible. For Andrew, killing was never simply about ending a life. It was about exercising complete power over another human being. That realization, however, belonged to the future. In January 1986, detectives had only questions. As news of Robin's murder spread through the community, grief settled over Saddleback College. Classmates struggled to comprehend what had happened. The campus that had once felt familiar now seemed unsettling after sunset. Students glanced over their shoulders while walking to parking lots. Friends began escorting one another to their cars. Parents who had encouraged independence suddenly insisted on late-night phone calls confirming safe arrivals home. Fear has a remarkable ability to transform ordinary places. The same sidewalks looked different. The same parking spaces felt isolated. The same evening routines suddenly carried invisible risks. Faculty members mourned alongside students. Counselors met with those who had known Robin personally, helping them process emotions that ranged from disbelief to anger. Many could not reconcile the image of the talented young pianist they had applauded only days earlier with the brutality described in newspaper headlines. Her family faced an even greater burden. They were forced to begin planning a funeral while investigators continued searching for answers. Photographs once taken to celebrate birthdays and graduations became memorial portraits. Conversations shifted from future plans to cherished memories. The house that had once echoed with ordinary family life grew painfully quiet. Every untouched belonging became a reminder of interrupted dreams. For detectives, grief had to be set aside. There was work to do. Evidence moved to forensic laboratories. Reports filled thick case files. Tips arrived from members of the public, each requiring careful evaluation. Most led nowhere. Some consumed valuable days before being eliminated. Others appeared promising only to collapse under closer examination. The investigation slowly expanded beyond the campus. Officers considered whether the offender might have committed similar crimes elsewhere. They reviewed unsolved cases involving young women, comparing crime scene details in search of common elements. Nothing fit perfectly. There were similarities here and there, but no definitive connection emerged. Without a suspect, every possibility remained open. Perhaps the killer lived nearby. Perhaps he had simply been passing through. Perhaps he would never kill again. Investigators hoped desperately that this had been an isolated act. History would prove otherwise. Somewhere in Southern California, Andrew Erdiels continued living behind the shield of anonymity. He returned to military responsibilities. He interacted with co-workers. He appeared, by all outward appearances, to be another disciplined young Marine navigating ordinary life. No one around him knew that he had already crossed a line from which there was no return. Behavioral experts often describe a first murder as a significant psychological threshold. Before that moment, violent fantasies remain internal. Afterward, the offender possesses something different, experience. If the crime goes unsolved, that experience can become dangerously empowering. Fear of capture begins to fade. Confidence grows. Mistakes become lessons. Investigators would later conclude that Andrew's first known murder did not satisfy his need for control. It encouraged it. Each successful escape reinforced the belief that he was smarter than the people searching for him. Each day without an arrest became evidence, in his mind, that he could continue. The tragedy of unsolved serial crimes lies partly in what investigators cannot know at the time. Every missed connection, every unidentified suspect. Every case placed temporarily on a shelf. All of them create opportunities for future victims. Detectives working Robin Brandley's case could not have known that the man they failed to identify would continue hunting women for years, crossing state lines and leaving behind more grieving families before justice finally caught up with him. They pursued every lead available. They worked with the evidence technology of their era. They refused to forget Robin. But despite their determination, the investigation gradually slowed. Weeks became months. Months became years. The case remained open, but answers remained painfully out of reach. For Robin's loved ones, life continued in the only way it could. Birthdays came and went. Holidays arrived carrying an empty chair at the table. Time moved forward, but grief did not follow the same schedule. Every anniversary reopened the wound. Every news report about another missing woman stirred painful memories. They waited for a phone call that never seemed to come. A breakthrough that refused to arrive. What no one realized was that the man responsible had already begun searching for someone else. The silence surrounding Robin Brandley's murder did not mark the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a decade-long trail of violence that would stretch across multiple states, confound law enforcement, and reveal one of the most calculating serial predators America had almost overlooked. For nearly a year after Robin Brandley's murder, the investigation remained suspended between determination and frustration. Detectives refused to abandon the case, but every promising lead eventually dissolved into another dead end. Interview notes accumulated inside filing cabinets. Crime scene photographs were reviewed repeatedly, each examination raising the same unanswered questions. Laboratory reports confirmed details investigators already knew, yet none identified the man responsible. The case slowly became what every homicide detective fears most: an unsolved murder. For Robin's family, the passage of time offered no relief. People often imagine grief fading as months become years. In reality, grief changes shape rather than disappearing. The initial shock gives way to a quieter pain, one that settles into daily life. Family gatherings continue, but someone is always missing. Birthdays are still remembered. Christmas gifts are no longer purchased for one person. A favorite song suddenly becomes impossible to hear without remembering the one who is gone. While one family struggled to rebuild life around an absence that could never truly be filled, somewhere else another story was quietly unfolding. Andrew Erdiels had learned something that would influence everything that followed. He had killed. He had escaped. No police officer had knocked on his door. No detective had questioned him. No one around him suspected that beneath his disciplined exterior lived a man capable of extraordinary brutality. To investigators studying serial offenders, this period can become dangerously significant. Many violent predators describe their first successful murder as both terrifying and exhilarating. Before committing it, they fear making mistakes. They fear getting caught. They fear losing control of the situation. But when none of those fears become reality, confidence replaces anxiety. The fantasy survives contact with reality. The offender begins believing he can do it again. Andrew appeared to reach exactly that conclusion. His life continued with remarkable normality. He remained connected to the Marine Corps, performing responsibilities that demanded discipline, precision, and emotional control. Fellow service members saw the same man they had always known. Nothing about his appearance suggested that he carried a secret capable of horrifying everyone around him. This ability to separate one identity from another became one of his greatest strengths. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as compartmentalization. It is the process of mentally separating conflicting parts of one's life so completely that they rarely collide. For most people, compartmentalization is harmless. Someone leaves workplace stress behind before returning home. A doctor finishes surgery and later attends a child's birthday party. Life naturally contains different roles. For violent offenders like Andrew, however, compartmentalization served a far darker purpose. One compartment contained routine. The other contained fantasy. As long as those worlds remained separate, suspicion remained almost impossible. Meanwhile, Southern California continued growing. New residential neighborhoods appeared where open land had once stretched toward the horizon. Shopping centers expanded. Military communities thrived around installations like Camp Pendleton. Students arrived from across the country to attend colleges throughout Orange County and San Diego. With growth came anonymity. Large populations make it easier for strangers to disappear into crowds. People pass one another every day without exchanging names. A person seen once is rarely remembered. For Andrew, this environment offered exactly what he needed. Opportunity without recognition. Unlike many serial offenders who repeatedly target the same neighborhood, Andrew demonstrated remarkable flexibility. He did not appear emotionally attached to a single hunting ground. Instead, he adapted to wherever circumstances provided vulnerable victims. Behavioral analysts would later conclude that his selection process focused less on location than on isolation. Isolation is often temporary. A crowded parking lot becomes empty in 10 minutes. A busy sidewalk becomes deserted after businesses close. A woman waiting alone for transportation may be surrounded by people one moment and completely alone the next. Predators understand these transitions because they spend time watching them. They observe routines invisible to everyone else. They notice when security guards change shifts. They recognize which parking areas empty first. They understand that ordinary people rarely expect danger during familiar routines. Andrew's military experience may have reinforced this patient style of observation. Training teaches soldiers to gather information before acting. To remain calm. To avoid unnecessary attention. To wait until conditions become favorable. Those skills are invaluable in combat. In the hands of a serial predator, they become terrifying. By late 1986 and into the years that followed, investigators believe Andrew's confidence continued growing. The fear that often accompanies a first murder gradually disappeared. Instead, violence became something he could plan. Something he could anticipate. Something he could incorporate into an otherwise ordinary existence. The people around him noticed none of this transformation. Co-workers described him as dependable. Neighbors remembered little about him at all. Friends saw no obvious signs that he was living a double life. This disconnect between appearance and reality would later become one of the most unsettling aspects of the entire case. Society often imagines monsters announcing themselves through unmistakable warning signs. The truth is frequently more disturbing. Some of history's most dangerous offenders succeeded precisely because they appeared ordinary. They paid bills, maintained employment, held conversations, smiled politely. Andrew fit comfortably into that illusion. Yet beneath the surface, investigators believe something was changing. Violence alone no longer satisfied him. Control became increasingly important. The ability to dominate another person's choices. To decide where they went. Whether they lived. Whether they died. This psychological need would eventually define nearly every known attack attributed to him. Control is different from anger. Anger explodes. Control is patient. It waits. It calculates. It enjoys anticipation almost as much as action. Behavioral experts studying lust killers often describe the crime beginning long before physical contact occurs. The fantasy starts while searching for a victim. It grows during surveillance. Every decision becomes part of a carefully imagined sequence. For Andrew, investigators believed the hunt itself became psychologically rewarding. Driving through neighborhoods. Watching isolated parking lots. Observing strangers who had absolutely no idea someone was evaluating them. From the victim's perspective, nothing unusual was happening. From the predator's perspective, the crime had already begun. This difference in perception explains why so many victims of predatory violence never recognize danger until escape has become nearly impossible. The offender has been making decisions for minutes, or even hours. The victim has only seconds. Law enforcement agencies during the late 1980s faced another challenge that would later become painfully clear. Communication between jurisdictions remained far more limited than today. Police departments shared information, but databases were smaller, technology was slower, and violent crimes committed in different counties or states often remained separate investigations unless obvious connections emerged. A killer capable of changing methods could exploit those limitations. Andrew appeared to do exactly that. No single detective could yet see the entire picture. Instead, pieces of the puzzle rested inside different offices, handled by different investigators, each focused on the crime directly in front of them. No one realized those pieces belonged together. That hidden advantage allowed Andrew something every serial predator desperately seeks. Time. Time to adapt. Time to learn. Time to choose another victim. By 1988, the silence surrounding Robin Brandley's murder had begun creating an illusion. Perhaps the killer had left California. Perhaps he had died. Perhaps the crime had been an isolated outburst that would never happen again. Those comforting possibilities slowly disappeared. Because somewhere in Southern California, another woman was about to cross paths with the same predator. She had her own plans. Her own family. Her own future. Like Robin, she could not have imagined that an ordinary day would become the final chapter of her life. The investigation into Andrew Erdiels was no longer about solving one murder. Without anyone realizing it, it was becoming the pursuit of a serial killer, whose confidence was growing with every year he remained invisible. By the time Andrew Erdiels chose another victim, the fear that had accompanied his first known murder had largely disappeared. What remained was calculation. Investigators would later believe that the successful evasion of law enforcement had profoundly changed the way he viewed himself. The uncertainty that may have existed after Robin Brandley's murder had been replaced with something far more dangerous, a growing belief that he could continue hunting without consequences. Confidence can be one of the most lethal weapons a serial offender possesses. The more successful an offender becomes at avoiding detection, the more disciplined and deliberate future crimes often become. Every escape reinforces the illusion of superiority. Every unsolved case convinces the killer that investigators are always one step behind. Andrew appeared to embrace that illusion. He continued moving between the structured world of military life and the hidden world that existed entirely in secret. During the day, routines governed his schedule. Orders were followed. Responsibilities were completed. Conversations remained ordinary. At night, however, another routine slowly emerged. Driving. Watching. Waiting. Behavioral profilers often describe predatory offenders as hunters rather than impulsive attackers. A hunter rarely rushes. He studies the environment, looking for conditions that favor success while minimizing risk. If circumstances are not ideal, he simply leaves and returns another day. Andrew demonstrated many of those characteristics. He did not appear interested in confrontation with people who could resist effectively or attract immediate attention. Instead, investigators concluded that he searched for moments when a woman found herself temporarily alone, walking through a parking lot, waiting for transportation, or traveling without companions. To everyone else, those moments lasted only a few minutes. To Andrew, they represented opportunity. The next known victims reflected that disturbing pattern. Julie McGee, Mary Ann Wells, Tammy Irwin, Denise Maney, Cindy Hubber, Lori Ulaki, Cassandra Coram. Each woman had her own life, her own ambitions, her own circle of family and friends. Some were living stable, ordinary lives. Others faced personal struggles. A few worked in environments that exposed them to greater risks. At first glance, investigators found little connecting them. That absence of an obvious pattern became one of Andrew's greatest advantages. Serial investigations depend heavily on victimology, the careful examination of who the victims are, how they lived, whom they associated with, and what circumstances surrounded their final hours. When victims share similar lifestyles, investigators can narrow the search. When they do not, the investigation becomes dramatically more complicated. Andrew's victims ranged between 18 and 32 years old. Some were students. Some held regular jobs. Some had histories that made investigators initially wonder whether different offenders were involved. The diversity was misleading. What united these women was not who they were. It was when they became vulnerable. Andrew seemed to care very little about social status, occupation, or background. He cared about isolation. He searched for situations where witnesses were scarce and escape would be difficult. That decision reflected something deeper than convenience. It reflected his need for absolute control. Unlike offenders driven primarily by robbery or revenge, Andrew's crimes revolved around domination. Investigators later concluded that the violence itself was only one part of the psychological experience he sought. The true objective began much earlier. The moment a victim realized something was terribly wrong. The moment hope began giving way to fear. The moment control shifted completely into his hands. As his crimes accumulated, another troubling characteristic became apparent. His methods changed. Some victims were stabbed. Others were shot. Evidence suggested restraint in certain attacks. Other scenes displayed different forms of violence. To inexperienced observers, these differences might suggest multiple offenders. Experienced investigators understood that while many serial killers repeat identical methods, others adapt constantly. The weapon is only a tool. The psychological purpose remains unchanged. Andrew's crimes consistently revealed one underlying theme: power. The ability to dictate every outcome. That desire for domination distinguished him from offenders whose motives centered on money or personal disputes. Nothing indicated that he killed for financial gain. He did not target wealthy victims. He did not build elaborate schemes to profit afterward. Valuables often remained untouched. The murders themselves were the objective. This realization profoundly influenced later psychological assessments. Experts classified Andrew as fitting the profile of what is often called a lust killer, not because the crimes were driven solely by sexual assault, but because they reflected gratification derived from domination, terror, and complete psychological control over another human being. For these offenders, fear becomes part of the fantasy. Investigators, who later analyzed Andrew's statements, found something deeply disturbing. He acknowledged that hearing victims plead for their lives heightened his sense of control. That admission revealed more than simple cruelty. It demonstrated emotional detachment so profound that another person's desperation became psychologically rewarding rather than distressing. Such thinking represents one of the most alarming forms of violent criminal psychology. Empathy disappears. Human suffering becomes entertainment. Another person's life becomes secondary to the offender's emotional experience. Yet while Andrew's inner world grew increasingly violent, his public life remained remarkably ordinary. Co-workers continued interacting with him without suspicion. Acquaintances remembered polite conversations. Neighbors saw nothing extraordinary. The duality remained intact. This contrast often frustrates families after an offender is identified. People naturally ask how no one noticed. How no one recognized warning signs. The painful truth is that many offenders deliberately construct lives designed to appear ordinary. Some even value appearing helpful and dependable because it reduces suspicion. Andrew's ability to maintain that facade prolonged his freedom. Meanwhile, detectives investigating individual murders faced enormous obstacles. Each homicide generated its own files, its own witness interviews, its own forensic evidence. Without today's integrated databases and sophisticated DNA analysis, linking geographically separated crimes demanded extraordinary cooperation, and often depended upon striking similarities that Andrew intentionally or instinctively avoided. His willingness to vary weapons complicated comparisons. His choice of victims blurred investigative categories. His mobility expanded the challenge even further. He was not confined to one neighborhood, or even one city. His world extended across multiple jurisdictions. As months turned into years, families of the victims experienced a unique kind of suffering. An arrest never came. Court proceedings never began. Questions remained unanswered. Parents wondered whether the killer might someday be caught. Siblings imagined what their loved ones' lives might have become. Friends reached milestones, graduations, marriages, careers, while carrying the absence of someone who should have shared those moments. Time continued moving forward. Justice did not. For detectives, unsolved homicide files never truly disappear. They remain on shelves, waiting for new evidence, fresh technology, or an overlooked connection capable of changing everything. Every experienced investigator understands that a single breakthrough can suddenly breathe life into a case that has remained silent for years. At the time, however, no such breakthrough existed. Andrew Erdiels remained invisible. He had become increasingly confident, increasingly organized, increasingly willing to refine the methods that kept him beyond the reach of law enforcement. Yet beneath that confidence lay a weakness he did not fully recognize. Every serial offender believes, at least for a time, that careful planning guarantees permanent freedom. History repeatedly proves otherwise. Patterns emerge. Mistakes accumulate. Chance intervenes. Someone survives. Someone remembers. Someone notices what everyone else overlooked. For Andrew, that moment was approaching, although neither he nor the investigators searching for him could yet see it. In September 1992, 6 years after the murder of Robin Brandley, an ordinary young woman named Jennifer Aspenson would unknowingly step into his carefully hidden world. Unlike the women who came before her, Jennifer would refuse to surrender. And because she survived, the invisible predator, who had spent years moving through the shadows, would finally begin leaving behind something investigators had never possessed before. A living witness. September 1992 began like any other month for 19-year-old Jennifer Aspenson. She was young, independent, and trying to build an ordinary life one day at a time. Like thousands of teenagers making the difficult transition into adulthood, she balanced work, responsibilities, and the constant challenge of finding reliable transportation. Every shift mattered. Every paycheck mattered. Missing work was not an option. There was nothing unusual about the morning her life changed forever. The sky over Southern California was already warming beneath the late summer sun. Traffic moved steadily along the highways as commuters hurried toward offices, warehouses, restaurants, and military installations. Bus stops filled with people beginning another ordinary day. Jennifer arrived expecting to catch her usual bus. She was too late. As the bus disappeared down the road, she stood watching it grow smaller until it vanished into traffic. For a moment she considered her options. Waiting for another bus would almost certainly make her late for work. Calling someone for a ride wasn't easy. She glanced up and down the road, weighing possibilities that seemed perfectly ordinary at the time. Then a car slowed beside her. The driver rolled down his window. He smiled. His voice was calm. There was nothing immediately alarming about his appearance. He looked clean. Well-groomed. Polite. Someone who seemed willing to help a young woman who had simply missed her bus. The man introduced himself as Andrew. Jennifer hesitated. Every child grows up hearing warnings about strangers, yet everyday life constantly reminds us that strangers can also be kind. People help change flat tires. They hold doors open. They offer directions. They stop to assist someone whose car has broken down. Society depends upon small moments of trust. Predators exploit them. Andrew did not pressure her. He spoke casually. His tone remained relaxed. He offered to drive her to work. Jennifer studied him for a moment. Nothing about him triggered immediate fear. He did not appear intoxicated. He did not seem aggressive. His vehicle looked ordinary. After a brief hesitation, she accepted. It seemed like a simple decision. One that countless people had made before without consequence. The drive itself reinforced that first impression. Andrew made conversation. He asked ordinary questions. Where did she work? How long had she lived in the area? Did she enjoy her job? Nothing felt especially unusual. Jennifer gradually relaxed. By the time they reached her workplace, the awkwardness of accepting a ride from a stranger had largely disappeared. She thanked him. He smiled again. Before driving away, he asked if she would like a ride home after her shift. Jennifer declined politely. Instead of insisting, Andrew simply asked for her phone number. She faced an uncomfortable decision. Rejecting someone directly can sometimes create tension, especially when that person has just done something helpful. Wanting to avoid conflict, Jennifer gave him a false number. She assumed that would be the end of the encounter. She watched him drive away. Then she went inside to begin her shift. For most people, that brief interaction would have faded from memory within a day or two. But Andrew was not most people. Throughout her shift, Jennifer focused on work. Customers came and went. Hours passed. Outside, daylight gradually surrendered to evening. The parking lot changed with the setting sun. Cars disappeared one by one. The familiar rhythm of another workday slowly reached its conclusion. When Jennifer finally clocked out, exhaustion had replaced the stress of the morning. She stepped outside expecting nothing more than the trip home. Instead, she saw a car she recognized. Andrew was waiting. His smile appeared exactly as it had that morning. Calm. Friendly. Patient. For an instant, Jennifer felt surprised rather than frightened. She hadn't expected him to return after receiving what she believed was a useless phone number. Perhaps he had simply decided to check anyway. Perhaps he happened to be nearby. Her mind searched for ordinary explanations, because ordinary explanations are what people naturally seek. Andrew greeted her warmly, as though they were already acquaintances. He reminded her that he had offered to drive her home. Jennifer hesitated again. She was tired. Transportation remained difficult. The ride that morning had been completely uneventful. Against her better judgment, but supported by the reassuring memory of the earlier trip, she climbed back into the passenger seat. That single decision would become the turning point between normal life and unimaginable terror. At first, everything seemed familiar. Andrew drove calmly. Traffic moved around them. The conversation began politely, almost casually. Then his questions changed. His voice remained controlled, but something beneath the surface shifted. He mentioned the phone number. He had tried calling it. It wasn't real. Jennifer immediately understood. The atmosphere inside the car changed almost instantly. The polite stranger disappeared. In his place sat someone colder. Someone watching her reaction with unsettling intensity. She apologized. She tried to explain that she hadn't meant any harm. Many people in similar situations attempt exactly that. They hope honesty or kindness will calm growing tension. But Andrew wasn't looking for reassurance. He was looking for submission. Without warning, his demeanor hardened. The friendliness vanished from his face. His questions became accusations. Why had she lied? Didn't she trust him? After everything he had done to help her. The conversation no longer resembled two strangers speaking politely. It felt like an interrogation. Jennifer sensed danger rising. Every instinct told her something was terribly wrong. She glanced toward the door. Traffic continued flowing outside. People drove past without noticing anything unusual. Inside the vehicle, however, fear quietly settled into every passing second. Andrew turned away from the familiar route. Jennifer noticed almost immediately. She questioned him. He answered vaguely, claiming he knew a shortcut. She looked through the windshield, trying to recognize nearby streets. The scenery gradually changed. Busy roads gave way to quieter ones. Buildings became less frequent. Streetlights grew farther apart. The city slowly disappeared behind them. Every mile increased the distance between Jennifer and possible help. She asked him to stop. He ignored her. She asked again, more firmly this time. Andrew's expression remained unreadable. He continued driving. The realization struck with terrifying clarity. She was no longer accepting a ride. She was trapped. Panic surged through her body. She reached for the door handle. Andrew reacted instantly. His hand shot toward her with explosive violence. The first blow came so suddenly that she barely had time to understand what had happened. Pain exploded across her face. The force stunned her. The polite driver, who had smiled only hours earlier, had completely disappeared. In his place sat a predator, who no longer saw any reason to hide. Jennifer screamed. She pleaded with him to let her out. Traffic had thinned considerably. Few vehicles passed in either direction. Those that did moved too quickly to notice what was happening inside another car. Andrew shouted back, furious about the false phone number. His anger seemed wildly disproportionate. It became obvious that the phone number itself was never the real issue. The deception had simply provided an excuse. An excuse to reveal the violence he had been suppressing all along. Jennifer desperately searched for another opportunity to escape. She watched the road. She studied the locks. She considered jumping from the moving vehicle despite the obvious risk. Anything seemed preferable to remaining inside with the man whose calm smile had transformed into something terrifying. The city skyline had completely disappeared. Ahead lay only open roads leading toward isolated stretches of desert. And Jennifer understood, with growing horror, that wherever Andrew was taking her, no one was waiting there to help. The farther they drove, the quieter the world became. The steady noise of city traffic faded behind them, replaced by long stretches of empty road cutting through the Southern California desert. Dry hills rolled across the horizon beneath a fading evening sky, their outlines slowly disappearing as daylight surrendered to darkness. There were no busy intersections. No storefronts glowing with neon signs. No pedestrians walking home from work. Only miles of open land. Jennifer pressed herself against the passenger door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the sound of the engine. She continued pleading with Andrew. "Please. Just let me out." Her voice shook with fear, but Andrew barely acknowledged her. His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. His expression was calm again. That sudden return to composure frightened Jennifer even more than his earlier outburst. Moments before, he had exploded in anger. Now he looked almost relaxed. As if everything were unfolding exactly as he had planned. Predators often rely on emotional instability to intimidate victims. Sudden shifts between calmness and violence create confusion, making it difficult for the victim to predict what will happen next. Jennifer experienced that uncertainty with every passing minute. She could no longer anticipate his reactions. Would speaking make him angry? Would silence make things worse? Every decision carried unknown consequences. Eventually Andrew turned off the main road onto an isolated dirt track. Dust rose behind the car, briefly visible in the fading light, before disappearing into the evening air. The tires bounced over uneven ground. Jennifer looked in every direction. There was nothing. No houses. No passing vehicles. No lights. No signs that another human being was anywhere nearby. The isolation felt overwhelming. Andrew finally brought the vehicle to a stop. For a brief second, the silence inside the car seemed almost unnatural. Then everything happened at once. He lunged toward Jennifer. She fought back instinctively. She pushed against him. Kicked. Scratched. Desperately trying to create enough space to escape. Andrew was stronger. Military training had given him significant physical advantages, but Jennifer refused to surrender. The struggle continued outside the vehicle. The desert floor offered little traction. Loose sand shifted beneath their feet as Jennifer tried desperately to break free. Andrew forced her to the ground. He restrained her hands. He produced material to bind her wrists tightly together. Every movement became more difficult. Jennifer realized he had prepared for this. The restraints were not improvised. They were part of a plan. That realization brought a new level of terror. This was not a spontaneous assault. He had anticipated needing to control another human being. He had come prepared. Andrew attempted to sexually assault her. Jennifer resisted with everything she had. She screamed. She twisted. She kicked whenever she found an opening. Every second she continued fighting increased the possibility that something, anything, might interrupt the attack. Investigators would later conclude that Jennifer's refusal to give up played an extraordinary role in her survival. Many victims freeze under overwhelming fear. Others comply, hoping cooperation might reduce violence. There is no universally correct response to extreme danger. Every situation is different. Every survivor acts according to circumstances impossible to judge from a distance. Jennifer's determination reflected an unwavering instinct to survive. Andrew eventually forced her into the trunk of his car. The heavy lid slammed shut above her. Instant darkness surrounded her. The air felt hot and stale. Metal enclosed her from every side. She could hear the muffled sound of the engine starting again. Then the vehicle began moving. Inside the trunk, Jennifer struggled to control her breathing. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. She understood exactly what many homicide victims never have the opportunity to realize. She believed she was being transported to the place where she would die. Yet even in that unimaginable situation, her mind continued searching for solutions. She tested the bindings around her wrists. They were painfully tight. Every movement scraped her skin. She ignored the pain. Again and again she worked against the restraints. Twisting. Pulling. Searching for even the slightest weakness. Minutes passed. Perhaps longer. Time inside the darkness became impossible to measure. The car slowed occasionally before accelerating again. Jennifer concentrated entirely on freeing herself. Eventually she felt something change. One wrist shifted slightly. Not much. Only enough to suggest the bindings might loosen with continued effort. Hope returned. Tiny. Fragile. But real. She continued working relentlessly. Her hands burned. Her fingers ached. Finally one hand slipped free. She immediately reached for the remaining restraint. Within moments both hands were loose. For the first time since the nightmare began, she possessed a chance. Not safety. Only a chance. She felt around the inside of the trunk. Searching desperately. Her fingers eventually located the emergency release mechanism. Carefully, silently, she tested it. The trunk opened. Only slightly at first. Cool night air rushed inside. Jennifer looked through the narrow opening. Darkness surrounded the vehicle. She could not tell exactly where they were. The car eventually slowed. Then stopped. She heard Andrew open his door. This was the moment. There would never be a better one. Jennifer pushed the trunk completely open and threw herself onto the ground. She hit the dirt hard. Pain shot through her body. Ignoring it, she immediately stood and began running. She did not look back. She simply ran. Across rough desert ground. Toward the distant highway. Toward any possibility of another human being. Behind her, she heard shouting. Then footsteps. Andrew had realized she was gone. He began chasing her. Investigators later learned he was armed with a knife. Jennifer could hear him closing the distance. The darkness made running difficult. The uneven ground threatened to send her crashing to the earth with every stride. Still she kept moving. Fear became fuel. Every heartbeat carried a single message. Keep running. Do not stop. Ahead, she saw headlights. A truck approached along the nearby road. Jennifer sprinted toward it, waving both arms wildly. The driver noticed her. At first, the scene must have appeared almost unbelievable. A terrified young woman emerging from the darkness. clothing disheveled, barely able to breathe, running as though her life depended on reaching the road. Because it did. The truck slowed. Jennifer reached it just as Andrew abandoned the chase. Whether he feared being seen or realized the opportunity had vanished, investigators could never know with certainty. What mattered was that he turned away. For the first time in years, one of his intended victims had escaped alive. The truck driver immediately recognized that Jennifer needed help. He brought her to safety while authorities were contacted. When deputies arrived, they encountered a young woman shaken to her core, but determined to describe everything she could remember. She described Andrew. His appearance. His car. His manner of speaking. The route they had traveled. Most importantly, she described how completely ordinary he had seemed when they first met. That detail would stay with investigators. The man she described was not a wild-eyed stranger lurking in the shadows. He was polite, helpful, patient. Exactly the kind of person most individuals would never consider dangerous. Jennifer's survival represented far more than a personal miracle. For law enforcement, it marked the first significant crack in the invisible wall Andrew Erdiels had built around himself. Until that night, every known victim had been unable to tell investigators what had happened. Crime scenes could reveal only physical evidence. Now, for the first time, detectives possessed something infinitely more powerful. A witness who had looked directly into the eyes of the man who hunted women. Andrew Erdiels had spent years believing he controlled every ending. Jennifer Aspenson proved him wrong. She had escaped. She had survived. And although neither she nor the investigators could yet realize it, her determination would become one of the most important turning points in the entire case. The hunter had finally made a mistake. And from that moment forward, the path toward his eventual downfall had quietly begun. Jennifer Aspenson's escape changed everything. Until that September night, every known encounter with Andrew Erdiels had ended the same way. A woman disappeared. Investigators reconstructed her final hours from scattered evidence, witness statements, and forensic reports. The killer remained a shadow. He left behind victims who could no longer speak for themselves. Jennifer broke that pattern. For the first time, law enforcement was no longer relying solely on silent crime scenes. They had a survivor. In the hours after her escape, deputies brought Jennifer to safety. She was exhausted, bruised, and still struggling to process the nightmare she had just endured. Every muscle in her body trembled from adrenaline. Dirt clung to her clothes. Her wrists bore painful marks where the bindings had cut into her skin. Yet despite the shock, she understood something important. The man who had attacked her was still free. If she could help investigators identify him, perhaps another woman would never have to experience what she had survived. Detectives approached the interview with extraordinary care. Victims of violent crimes often remember certain details with remarkable clarity, while other moments become blurred by trauma. Memory under extreme stress does not function like a video recording. Some images remain vivid forever. Others disappear completely. Jennifer closed her eyes as investigators asked their first questions. She pictured the bus stop. The car slowing beside her. Andrew's smile. The casual conversation during the drive to work. She remembered how ordinary his voice had sounded. Nothing theatrical. Nothing intimidating. Just a man speaking politely to a stranger. That detail struck investigators immediately. Predators who depend on deception rarely appear threatening during first contact. They understand that trust opens far more doors than intimidation ever could. Jennifer described his appearance carefully. His approximate age. His build. His hairstyle. His mannerisms. She remembered the vehicle in surprising detail, replaying every moment she had spent inside it. Detectives sketched maps based on her recollection of the route into the desert. Although trauma made precise distances difficult to estimate, every turn she remembered helped narrow possible locations where the assault had taken place. Crime scene technicians searched the remote area. The desert still held traces of the struggle. Disturbed sand. Footprints. Signs that two people had fought desperately against one another. Investigators collected every piece of physical evidence they could locate. At the time, however, forensic science still faced significant limitations. DNA technology existed, but it was far from becoming the powerful investigative tool the public recognizes today. Processing was slow. Databases were limited. Many agencies lacked immediate access to advanced testing methods that would later revolutionize criminal investigations. Physical evidence alone could not instantly identify Andrew. The investigation still depended heavily on traditional detective work. Jennifer worked with a forensic artist to create a composite sketch. The process required patience. The artist asked her to describe individual features rather than attempting to remember the entire face at once. The shape of the eyes. The nose. The jawline. The hair. Each revision brought the drawing closer to the man she had trusted only hours before. When the sketch was finally complete, Jennifer stared at it quietly. It was him. Not perfect, but close enough to make her heart race. The image soon circulated among investigators. Officers compared it against known offenders. They reviewed reports involving suspicious individuals operating in Southern California. Tips began arriving. Most proved useless. Some resembled the composite only vaguely. Others collapsed after routine interviews. The investigation advanced, but painfully slowly. Meanwhile, Andrew continued living his double life. He had failed to kill Jennifer. That alone represented an enormous departure from everything that had happened before. Behavioral experts later suggested that this failure may have unsettled him more deeply than investigators initially realized. Control had always defined his crimes. Jennifer had taken that control away. She escaped. She spoke to police. She could describe him. For a man whose confidence depended upon invisibility, that represented a dangerous development. Yet remarkably, Andrew still remained unidentified. His ordinary appearance protected him once again. The composite sketch resembled countless men living throughout Southern California. Nothing immediately pointed investigators toward a Marine with no known connection to Jennifer. The case remained active, but certainty remained elusive. Elsewhere, detectives working unsolved homicide investigations knew nothing about Jennifer's attacker. The investigators assigned to Robin Brandley's murder had their own files. Other agencies handled other murders. Communication existed, but serial investigations across jurisdictions often unfolded slowly during the early 1990s. Information traveled through meetings, telephone calls, mailed reports, and personal relationships between investigators. No centralized system instantly assembled every clue into a single picture. As a result, pieces of Andrew's history remained scattered across different departments. One detective held evidence from an unsolved stabbing. Another investigated a shooting. Another focused on a missing woman. Each case appeared unique. Only years later would the similarities become impossible to ignore. Jennifer's testimony nevertheless introduced something investigators had never possessed before. Insight into Andrew's behavior before the violence began. He did not rush. He built rapport. He presented himself as helpful. He allowed trust to develop naturally. That information transformed the way detectives viewed the attack. This had not been random chaos. It had been a carefully managed deception. Andrew selected opportunities where suspicion remained low. His greatest weapon was not the knife. It was patience. Detectives studying predatory offenders understood that charm can be as dangerous as physical force. Some serial killers overwhelm victims immediately. Others prefer manipulation. They create an emotional environment in which resistance appears unnecessary until escape has become impossible. Andrew clearly belonged to the second category. Jennifer described how quickly his personality changed once she admitted giving him a false phone number. Investigators questioned whether that revelation genuinely caused his anger or merely triggered violence he had planned all along. Most believed the latter. The false phone number had likely become an excuse rather than a motive. Had Jennifer provided her real number, investigators suspected he would simply have chosen another opportunity. The attack was never truly about rejection. It was about domination. Psychological profilers reviewing similar offenders frequently observe that many predators interpret even minor acts of independence as personal challenges to their authority. For Andrew, Jennifer's deception may have symbolized resistance. Resistance demanded punishment. Control had to be re-established. That pattern fit remarkably well with other violent offenders driven by power rather than material gain. Jennifer herself struggled emotionally during the weeks that followed. Physical injuries heal faster than psychological trauma. Simple routines suddenly became frightening. Parking lots no longer felt ordinary. Accepting help from strangers became unimaginable. Even hearing an unfamiliar car slow nearby could trigger memories of that September morning. Survival carries its own complicated emotions. Many victims later describe guilt for remaining alive when others did not. Some wonder whether they could have prevented future crimes. Others question every decision they made, replaying events repeatedly in search of different outcomes. Jennifer experienced many of those same struggles. Yet beneath the fear remained determination. She continued cooperating fully with investigators. Every interview, every clarification, every attempt to strengthen the case. She understood that somewhere outside the interview room, Andrew remained free. And she feared, correctly, that he would not stop hunting simply because one intended victim had escaped. Jennifer's greatest fear would soon become reality. Despite surviving one of the most terrifying encounters imaginable and providing investigators with valuable information, Andrew Erdils was still at large. No arrest followed. No search warrant led detectives to his door. He had slipped away once again, carrying with him the confidence that had been growing since his first known murder years earlier. For investigators, this was one of the most frustrating outcomes possible. They possessed a living witness. They had a description. They understood more about the offender's methods than ever before. Yet they still lacked the single piece of evidence that could put a name to the face Jennifer had described. The investigation remained active, but Andrew continued moving freely through everyday life. Behavioral specialists, reviewing the case later suggested that Jennifer's escape may have influenced Andrew's future decisions in subtle, but significant ways. Predators who lose control often adapt rather than abandon their behavior. Instead of seeing failure as a reason to stop, they analyze it. They identify what went wrong. Then they modify future attacks to reduce the chances of another victim escaping. That pattern has been documented repeatedly in serial crime investigations. Experience becomes education. Failure becomes instruction. Andrew appeared capable of exactly that kind of adjustment. His military background reinforced careful planning, patience, and discipline. He rarely acted impulsively once an attack had begun. Investigators believed he constantly evaluated risk, changing tactics whenever circumstances demanded it. That flexibility made him especially difficult to predict. Some serial offenders become trapped by ritual. Andrew seemed willing to abandon routines if they increased his chances of avoiding capture. While detectives continued searching for Jennifer's attacker, other families elsewhere were beginning their own painful journeys into uncertainty. A daughter failed to return home. A friend missed an expected meeting. A co-worker stopped answering calls. At first, every disappearance appeared isolated. Different cities. Different police departments. Different victims. No obvious reason to suspect they were connected. This fragmentation became one of Andrew's greatest advantages. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly within their own jurisdictions, but no investigator yet possessed the complete picture. Every department viewed its case through the lens of local evidence. One detective focused on a stabbing. Another investigated a shooting. Another examined signs of restraint. Because Andrew varied his methods, the crimes resisted easy classification. Even experienced homicide investigators naturally search for consistency. A serial offender, who repeatedly uses the same weapon, creates recognizable patterns. Andrew's willingness to change techniques obscured those patterns. The psychological similarities remained hidden beneath physical differences. Years later, once detectives finally assembled the timeline, they recognized the common thread. The attacks always revolved around opportunity. Isolation. Control. The victim's growing realization that help was becoming impossible. Everything else could change. That insight transformed the investigation, but reaching it required years of accumulated evidence. During those years, advances in forensic science quietly reshaped criminal investigations across the United States. DNA analysis continued developing rapidly throughout the 1990s. Laboratories improved testing procedures. Investigators gained greater confidence in biological evidence. Cases once considered impossible suddenly became solvable through techniques that barely existed when Robin Brandley was murdered in 1986. Cold case detectives watched these scientific developments with growing optimism. Evidence preserved years earlier might eventually answer questions that traditional investigative work never could. Patience, once again, became essential. Ironically, patience had defined both sides of the investigation. Andrew relied upon patience to find victims. Detectives relied upon patience to find him. Only one side could remain successful forever. Jennifer continued trying to rebuild her life. Recovery was anything but simple. Trauma rarely announces itself, only through nightmares. It appears unexpectedly. A familiar road. A stranger's voice. A car slowing beside the sidewalk. Ordinary moments suddenly become reminders of extraordinary fear. Many survivors describe constantly evaluating escape routes whenever entering unfamiliar places. They notice exits instinctively. They become aware of who is standing nearby. Trust, once freely given, becomes something earned slowly and cautiously. Jennifer carried those invisible changes every day. Yet she also carried something equally important. She had survived. That simple fact denied Andrew the complete control he sought over every victim. Her testimony existed. Her memories existed. No matter how carefully he attempted to erase evidence, he could never erase her. For Andrew, however, The years immediately following Jennifer's escape appeared outwardly uneventful. He maintained employment. He interacted normally with people around him. Nothing about his public life suggested increasing danger. This ordinary appearance repeatedly shielded him from suspicion. Friends later struggled to reconcile the man they believed they knew with the details presented during criminal proceedings. Many described disbelief. Some refused to accept that the polite individual they remembered could have committed such unimaginable violence. Others searched their memories for overlooked warning signs. Could they have noticed something? Should they have recognized hidden anger? The answers remained painfully uncertain. Some offenders successfully conceal their darkest impulses behind years of practiced normality. Andrew proved exceptionally skilled at doing exactly that. Meanwhile, homicide detectives refused to let unsolved cases disappear completely. Files remained organized. Evidence remained preserved. Investigators periodically revisited earlier conclusions, hoping fresh eyes might uncover overlooked connections. Cold case work demands extraordinary persistence. Every unsolved murder represents unfinished business. Every unidentified offender represents continuing danger. Detectives understand that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied. Sometimes the answer arrives years later. Sometimes decades. The challenge lies in preserving enough evidence to recognize that answer when it finally appears. Without realizing it, investigators were approaching exactly such a moment. The separate pieces scattered across California and beyond had begun moving slowly toward one another. A surviving witness. Advancing forensic science. Multiple unsolved homicides. An offender growing increasingly confident. Each element existed independently. Soon they would intersect. When that happened, Andrew Erdiel's carefully constructed double life would begin collapsing under the weight of connections that had remained invisible for far too long. The man who believed he had mastered invisibility was about to discover an unavoidable truth. Every crime leaves something behind. Sometimes it is physical evidence. Sometimes it is memory. Sometimes it is a survivor determined never to forget. And sometimes, years after the violence itself has ended, those scattered fragments come together with devastating clarity. For Andrew Erdiels, that moment was no longer a distant possibility. It was approaching with every unsolved file reopened, every forensic advance, and every detective unwilling to accept that 8 murdered women deserved to remain nothing more than forgotten names inside dusty case folders. The hunt that Andrew believed he controlled was slowly changing direction. For the first time in years, someone was beginning to hunt him.